Up next, did you know there's a remarkable land tortoise in Florida that's been here for millions of years, digs deep burrows in the ground, and may live to be 100 years old? Meet the gopher tortoise, one of the most important species in Florida. Coming up next on Wildlife Matters. This program is made possible by the Mosaic Company, committed to the sustainability of Florida's natural resources. The Mosaic Company is helping to provide habitat for key species such as the gopher tortoise. The Mosaic Company, helping the world grow the food it needs. Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, myfwc.com, Ngozi Plantation, and by the following generous contributors. Right now, you have the opportunity to be able to see a live gopher tortoise in the wild, a slow-moving, gentle, lovable creature with an amazing body design. You can even see where they live, their burrow. But because gopher tortoises and humans live in the same high, dry parts of Florida and the southeast, and because we haven't done such a great job in the past of saving space for the gopher tortoise numbers have declined by 50 to 60% over the past 100 years, making them very vulnerable to extinction. That's why you should know about this extraordinary reptile called the gopher tortoise and work as hard as you can to help conserve them, so our children and our grandchildren will have the same opportunity as we do to see and experience a living gopher tortoise. Unlike aquatic turtles that live in the water, the gopher tortoise lives on high and dry land. Joan Barish is a wildlife biologist with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission who's been studying gopher tortoises for 30 years.
The gopher tortoise is really considered a large terrestrial turtle. As you can see, its top shell, the carapace, is domed. Coloration tends to be brown, gray, although you can certainly get some that are tending toward blonde or tan. The bottom shell, the plastron, tends to be yellowish. This is a female, an adult female, and so her plastron is flat. Adult males would be concave on the bottom, dished in. Its most distinguishing characteristics are its stumpy, elephant-like hind feet and its shovel-like forelimbs adapted for digging.
As a turtle biologist, Dr. Matthew Oresco is an expert on amphibians and reptiles of the southeastern United States, including the gopher tortoise.
Gopher tortoise habitat is well-drained sandy uplands, so it could be longleaf pine, sandhill, scrubby flatwoods, and other types of natural habitats that have well-drained, deep sandy soils. They require an open canopy, so very open conditions where a lot of sunlight reaches the forest floor, and also an abundance of herbaceous vegetation.
Gopher tortoises eat native plants that have grown in this area long before European settlers arrived. These native plants include Virginia creeper, gopher apple, wild grape, bracken fern, prickly pear cactus, beautyberry, and many others. However, 80% of their diet is made up of broadleaf grasses. Just like you and I have a home to live in, the gopher tortoise digs a burrow in the ground to live in. Its burrow is where it goes to rest and find protection from the weather and from predators.
This is a gopher tortoise burrow right in front of us. The depth of the burrow will vary depending on how deep the sands are, but typically the burrow can reach lengths of 20 to 25 feet and 15 to 18 feet deep. You'll notice that the burrow is half moon-shaped in the shape of a tortoise, and usually only one tortoise lives in each burrow. The tortoise will dig this burrow. It'll take it a day or two to dig a burrow. It pushes all the sand out right in the front here, which is called an apron. And it spends probably 90% of its time in the burrow.
The gopher tortoise is one of 5 species of North American tortoise. It's the only one found east of the Mississippi River. It is found in parts of 6 coastal plain states. It ranges from southeastern Louisiana across southern Mississippi and southern Alabama, through Georgia and Florida, just the southern part of Georgia, but throughout Florida, and then just the southern tip of South Carolina.
Humans are similar to gopher tortoises in several ways. 1, we both prefer the same high, dry land to live on. And 2, both humans and gopher tortoises are very long-lived.
Tortoises in general are among the longest lived animals in the world. Gopher tortoises have been documented to live over 50 years. It would not surprise biologists to learn that they live probably over 100 years in some situations. Some of the other larger tortoise species in the world live well over 100 years. This particular tortoise is 47 years old, and so it's approaching 50 years old, and you can see it's got some wear on its shell. Just the abrasion of the sand, against the shell over time kind of smooths the shell out. But 47 years old, probably not that old for a tortoise. It may live another 50 years.
The gopher tortoise is considered to be a keystone species because its burrow provides a refuge and a home to many other animals.
Keystone actually derives from construction. It is the central stone in an arch, and without the keystone, the arch collapses. Similarly, the gopher tortoise plays a significant role in its sandhill habitat.
Without the gopher tortoise, hundreds of wildlife species would be greatly reduced or eliminated altogether.
Their burrow provides habitat, shelter, foraging habitat for at least 360 other documented species, from invertebrates to other reptiles, amphibians, and even birds and mammals. So they provide shelter to these species during fire and also during the wintertime in extremely cold conditions, and in the summer during extremely hot conditions.
Some of the species that depend upon gopher tortoise burrows include the indigo snake, gopher frog, pine snake, burrowing owl, Florida mouse, gopher cricket, and the scarab beetle. Because land development and roadways are threatening the natural population of gopher tortoises and taking over their habitats, homeowners will be dependent upon more and more to share their property with these slow-moving, docile creatures. Susan Romanello is a Florida homeowner who lives in Ormond Beach. She has chosen to share her yard with a gopher tortoise she calls Little Girl.
She's approximately 9.5 inches long, 9 inches wide. She's got a beautiful brown hard shell. She's a female, I believe, and she likes to stay on her burrow. There's a lot of armadillo and deer and wildlife in the area, so she kind of stays there a lot, but then she comes out between 2 and 5 and she feeds off of the weeds that are in the yard. She spends a lot of time here. This is her burrow, and she usually sits right about here, and if she hears any kind of movement out here, you can hear her. She goes right in. She just flops right in. She goes backwards.
Since the gopher tortoise started living in her backyard, Susan has changed the way she does things to accommodate her.
I don't spray anything back here because I don't want her to eat anything that's poisonous. These are the plants that she mainly eats, these weeds. So I just let them run my yard. Here's another one that I found that she eats, and this one looks like it makes a little yellow flower, and then it disperses a lot of seeds. And it's kind of thorny, so I don't know what it's called, but I don't pull this out anymore. And then there's one right over there, which is this one. She eats these.
Because the gopher tortoise is a listed species, state and federal laws make it illegal for anyone to kill, harass, or destroy gopher tortoises, their burrows, or eggs. So if you have a gopher tortoise on your land, you should make it a priority to protect them. And if you find yourself with natural areas on your property and a potential habitat for gopher tortoises, Susan has a message for you.
I would just say if you have an area like this that's very wooded, don't cut it all down, you know, to put more grass. Just leave it. Just leave it natural as it is. Let them come to your yard because that's what they seek, the refuge, the privacy, that's what they need.
Florida's population is growing, and this means more people are moving into areas where there once were only plants and animals like the gopher tortoise. In fact, gopher tortoise populations in only the past 100 years have declined by 50 to 60%.
Habitat loss, degradation of habitat, and fragmentation of habitat are the primary threats to gopher tortoises today. This type of habitat where we are, the well-drained sandy uplands, are prime development sites throughout the state of Florida for not just residential development but commercial development, roads, and also conversion of habitat from natural forest like this forest behind us to heavily stocked pine plantations, and also conversion to intensive agriculture also destroys gopher tortoise habitat.
Although the gopher tortoise has lived for millions of years, biologists who study these ancient reptiles are concerned they may disappear entirely unless we do more to protect and conserve them and their rapidly disappearing habitat.
Citizens and visitors of Florida can help preserve the gopher tortoise by becoming more aware of this wildlife species and knowing the needs of the species. Habitat is the critical backbone that this species depends on, and it's important for us to continue to grow as a people population, but also making sure that there's enough space for everybody, including the gopher tortoise.
Since 1972, the gopher tortoise has been regulated by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and since 1988, the gopher tortoise has been fully protected. But despite the afforded protection, gopher tortoise populations throughout Florida continue to decline. Because of this, a new management plan has been adopted since 2007 by FWC to decrease the rate at which the gopher tortoise is declining.
The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is implementing the Gopher Tortoise Management Plan and the 4 objectives included in that plan. Those objectives focus primarily on increasing habitat management where habitat has been degraded due to suppression of prescribed fire or natural fires, to conserve additional acres of habitat to ensure there's enough space for gopher tortoises to live into the future, to restock gopher tortoise populations where they have been depleted, and to ensure that they are responsibly and humanely relocated off of all development sites prior to any development activities.
To achieve these objectives, FWC is enlisting the help of state, local, and private entities across Florida. Volusia County is partnering with FWC to help protect gopher tortoises on private land through their Gopher Tortoise Ordinance.
We work very closely with the developers. First, we try to avoid burrows of the gopher tortoise if they are on the property that they want to develop, and set aside land actually on the project area in order to be able to coexist and live with the gopher tortoise. If that is not possible, then we work with them on doing the right thing and relocating them with the proper permits to the state.
Gopher tortoises that live on conservation land have it made, but those who live on private land are exposed to the possibility that the land they live on will eventually be developed. But since September of 2007, all landowners and developers must follow procedures laid out in the new Gopher Tortoise Management Plan. Now, before a landowner or developer can disturb vegetation or ground in preparation for development, they must survey the entire property to determine how many gopher tortoises are living there. If gopher tortoises are determined to live on a property, a landowner or developer has 4 options. 1. Avoid development altogether. 2. Avoid destruction of tortoise burrows and any impacts within 25 feet of the burrow. 3. Preserve additional habitat on site and relocate all gopher tortoises to this area. And 4. Relocate gopher tortoises off site to protected recipient sites. Under the new management plan, all gopher tortoises must be moved from harm's way prior to commencing any development activity. However, many developers still hold old incidental take permits which allow them to disregard gopher tortoises and their burrows and bury them beneath parking lots, shopping malls, and other development sites. But now the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is working with organizations like the Humane Society of the United States to encourage developers with old incidental take permits to do the right thing, amend their permits, and relocate gopher tortoises off their development sites even so. Crane Woods Development was the first Florida real estate developer to abandon its so-called pay and bury permit and instead opt to relocate gopher tortoises.
In the fall of 2006, one of our constituents contacted the Humane Society of the United States about a development in Ponce Inlet, the cottages at Ponce Inlet, the development property had 11 gopher tortoises living on the property, and construction was near its timeline. We contacted Crane Woods Development, the developer, and they were very interested in relocating those gopher tortoises. So with the help of volunteers, the Humane Society of the United States, Negosi Plantation, and Crane Woods Development, we all teamed up to make sure that these gopher tortoises on this property could be humanely relocated before development began.
I am a nature fanatic. I am in the business of real estate development, which does not seem like it sinks, but it does in many cases. And when we were given the opportunity to proceed with a great project without doing harm to gopher tortoises, whether they were threatened or not, it was just an immediate yes and a huge relief.
The cottages at Ponce Inlet was so unique when it comes to the conservation of gopher tortoises because it was the first time that a developer who holds an incidental take permit was able to humanely relocate those tortoises rather than entombing them.
If you have an old incidental take permit, Andy says relocating the gopher tortoises from your site is the honorable thing to do.
It's easy. I think they need to recognize the benefits of relocating the tortoises, both in terms of their own conscience and in terms of the Florida environment. Contact the Humane Society of the United States and do the right thing.
Even if developers do their part and relocate gopher tortoises from their development sites, it's important to realize that the success of conserving gopher tortoises is equally dependent on creating and managing habitats where they can go. Establishing permanent places that won't be developed where gopher tortoises can live indefinitely is crucial. That's why FWC is making it a #1 priority to encourage all public and private landowners to make places on their property for gopher tortoises.
Landowners can help conserve the gopher tortoise on their property by managing the habitat for which they depend on. They can also help by protecting additional acres of gopher tortoise habitat in the state of Florida with a conservation easement. They can also enroll their lands to become a gopher tortoise recipient site. And a recipient site acts as the receiver of those tortoises that have to be moved off of those development sites.
Many of the natural lands that remain in Florida currently do not have substantial populations of gopher tortoises living on them. So FWC is trying to convince as many public and private landowners as possible to become gopher tortoise recipient sites and receive the gopher tortoises that must be moved from development sites. Landowners like MC Davis are helping the FWC staff to meet their objective. MC owns 50,000 acres of land in the Florida Panhandle, which he's dedicated completely to wildlife conservation. It's called Negosi Plantation, and it's the largest private conservation initiative east of the Mississippi River.
Well, I reached that juncture about 17 years ago. I finally made some money and had my living made, so to speak, and I could dedicate the rest of my life and the rest of my resources to conservation. This is a biological hotspot. This large tract of land, this 50,000 acres here, named Ngozi, which incidentally is the Creek word, the indigenous people's name for black bear. This is the 6th most biodiverse place in the country.
MC realizes saving the gopher tortoise is a very important part of the entire wildlife conservation effort, so he's teamed up with turtle biologist Dr. Matthew Oresco to manage the 50,000 acres of wildlife habitat that make up Ngozi Plantation. These two men are doing work with a gopher tortoise that's never been done before.
We've done dozens and dozens of relocation projects, and in total we've relocated over 2,600 gopher tortoises since May of 2006. Our gopher tortoises are coming from lands that are slated for development, so whether it be industrial sites, highway sites, or residential development sites.
But even though gopher tortoises are being relocated to conservation lands, their future is not 100% insured. Because gopher tortoises have internal GPS-like senses and always try to get back to where they came from, relocating gopher tortoises needs to be done with care.
One of the main problems with gopher tortoise relocation is actually retaining the gopher tortoises on the site. And the way to do that is to build enclosures so that they don't leave the site. This is an enclosure that's constructed from heavy-duty silt fence, and it's buried about 18 inches in the ground, and this particular site is 70 acres. And so prior to introducing the first relocated tortoises to a site, typically we'll burn the site to improve the habitat. We monitor the site to determine how many gopher tortoises are on the site, and then we'll install this enclosure. And we leave the enclosure up typically for about 12 months after the last tortoise is put into the enclosure. And we found that by using these enclosures that 90% of the gopher tortoises stay within the original confines of the enclosure on the site after the silt fence is taken down.
Managing their land for gopher tortoises is another reason Ngozi Plantation has such a high success rate with relocating gopher tortoises.
Active habitat management is critical to the survival of gopher tortoises. In fact, in many protected areas, a lack of habitat management has caused long-term declines of the gopher tortoises. So here at Ngozi Plantation, we improve gopher tortoise habitat, number one, by prescribed burning, which creates an open canopy, removes the mid-story shrub layer, and enhances the ground cover plants that the gopher tortoise eats. The second primary habitat management tool that we use is thinning the pine canopy. In many areas where there were planted pines, the stocking density of the pines was much too high for open canopy conditions.
Gopher tortoises first appeared on Earth over 2 million years ago. That's 10 times longer than mankind has been around. But the recent conversion of the gopher tortoise's upland habitats for human use is something the gopher tortoise may not be able to overcome without our help. Here are some things you can do to help conserve gopher tortoises. Don't allow others to throw things down a gopher tortoise's burrow. This is illegal and can harm a gopher tortoise. Keep your cats inside. Cats kill lots of wildlife and can be harmful to juvenile tortoises. Don't allow your dogs to go near gopher tortoise burrows. Dogs can do a lot of damage to a gopher tortoise. Make sure those clearing land in your area have a permit before they destroy gopher tortoises or their burrows. If you suspect illegal activity, report it to FWC's Wildlife Alert Hotline at 888-404-3922 or online at myfwc.com/law/alert. And finally, don't move gopher tortoises from where you find them. They usually know where they're going, and never take them home. If a tortoise is in danger, it's okay to help or contact your Florida Fish and Wildlife Regional Office for assistance.
I would send out a call to action at large to anyone who could possibly afford it, and in particular those who own large tracts of land, that we're here for such a brief period of time that we hardly have the right to impact the land much, that we should leave it where it is sustainable.
As we've learned today, the biggest threat to the gopher tortoise's long-term survival is loss of habitat. So please, make it a priority to do all that you can to help save space for the gopher tortoise. Let's allow our children and our grandchildren to have the same opportunity as we do to experience this delightful land turtle, whose simple hole in the ground provides life to over 400 other species. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Wildlife Matters. For more information about conservation incentives available to help conserve gopher tortoises on your property and to download educational materials, visit myfwc.com/gopher tortoise. This program is made possible by the Mosaic Company, committed to the sustainability of Florida's natural resources. The Mosaic Company is helping to provide habitat for key species such as the gopher tortoise. The Mosaic Company, helping the world grow the food it needs. Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, myfwc.com, Ngozi Plantation, and by the following generous contributors. To share your feedback about this program or to order a DVD copy of Save Space for the Gopher Tortoise, plus additional programs in the Wildlife Matters series, please visit our website at www.naturewisetv.org. This program was created and produced by NatureWise Incorporated, improving the environment through educational television and video, www.naturewisetv.org.